second section. In last session, you had provided lots of the insight on LCA, and today you had taken your time for the Indian Carbon Trade Scheme. So, as you know, recently B has released a draft for the Indian Carbon Trade Scheme. So, at today's session, we will trying to cover the highlight of this scheme, how the trading scheme is working, how the Indian carbon market will be coming at future. So we had received lots of the query from various participants. So mostly people are asking the question ki how the Indian carbon credit work in future, how it will be voluntary, it will be mandatory, how the carbon credit generate. So Samicha, mostly participants want to know ki what is the carbon credit, how the carbon registry work, if they will want to start a carbon credit project, how the Indian rules and regulation will implemented, and in future how the carbon credit work at India. Because as you know, when we are working on the net zero and SBTi carbon setting, every carbon credit we cannot working towards for the net zero. So what is the difference between different carbon credit? Like some carbon credit coming from the nature based solution, some coming from the different aspects. So which carbon credit is most suitable for a decarbonization strategy, and how the future and current rules and regulation Indian government are working towards net zero. So I am giving stage to you, and I am thankful for your time and your knowledge. And today we are waiting for your more insight on the carbon credit. So welcome, Samisha. Thanks for your time. You can start.
Thank you, Nitin. So, most of you mostly know me from the last session which we had for LCA. I know there was a lot of buzz with respect to the detailed session. So, we are developing that. We'll soon have that. But we thought that because the CCTS draft is out, and again, there's a lot of buzz around it, that how the calculations will be made, what is a framework, who will be the stakeholders when it comes to CCTS or the carbon trading market in India. So we thought that we'll have some small session where we'll actually cover the whole draft around the trading session, and as and when we get the updates, we'll keep sending those updates to you. So let me just quickly share my screen. So is my screen visible, Nitin?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Samisha, it's visual.
Yeah, it's visible.
So just let me give you an overview with respect to CCTS, or the Indian carbon market that we talk about. So the draft was recently out, as in the month of March 2023 itself. There was a first draft which was out, which talked about what is Indian carbon market, the different governance structures, the responsibilities when it comes to governance of the Indian carbon market, who are going to be the stakeholders, who will play the important role when it comes to functioning of the whole carbon market. So there was a sort of, just to give you a gist, there was a committee of 19 to 22 members who were sitting along, and who saw that how the market will be overseen by BEE. BEE is going to be, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency is going to be a very important stakeholder when when it comes to designing of the framework, or certain like bringing in the verification aspect, and overseeing the whole carbon market when it comes to from the administrator point of view. Also, there is a very detailed understanding of CCTS, and B has been the part of the earlier market as well, where we talk about PAT scheme, performance achievement and trade scheme. And somewhere that PAT scheme has been learning for the when it comes to Indian carbon market, or developing the Indian carbon market, development of the Indian carbon market as well. So basically, when we talk about Indian carbon market and the draft inclusions, so on a very broad perspective, what is ICM? What is Indian carbon market? So it is basically a market based on the carbon trading, which is established by the Indian market to Indian government to reduce the emissions and somewhere combat the climate change. So if you talk about other countries, there are many other countries who already have their internal cap trade market just to regulate the emissions within within their territories in themselves. But that actually that came up as a learning for our country as well, and that is how we developed the Indian carbon market, by taking the teachings from there. Obviously, part scheme has played a very brief role when it came to designing of the aspect, designing aspect. How should be the limitations, or how should be the when it comes to emissions intensity. So what should be the target that should be given, etc. So that is not yet detailed out, but on a very high level, the draft is what we are going to discuss as of today, and one example is what we are going to discuss as of today. So this CCTS scheme, okay, or we call it CCTS, or we call it carbon credit trading scheme. So it is a framework which actually gives a basic governance structure of the responsibilities of the various stakeholders who are going to be part of the entire carbon market. And it somewhere talks about the guidelines on emission reduction and how the trading mechanisms will work. So there comes a very important aspect when you talk about carbon market, which is voluntary market and a compliance market. So just to give you on a very broad level, voluntary market, the trades based on the voluntary commitments or the same self-imposed targets by the industries, they take care of it. For example, let's say you may have seen that organizations have their own carbon neutrality targets and a net zero target as well. So let's say if you're not a obligated entity, you do not fall under the obligated entity as per the government rules. So that if you are still going and buying the credits and offsetting the emissions, that will be mostly like a voluntary market aspect. But when it comes to a compliance market, so it relies on the legislative tools and the codified industry specific targets, which is we are going to have under CCTS. So, when we talk about PAT, or when we talk about performance, achievement, and trade, so as I said, it has been very valuable. Why? Because somewhere it has helped us and many industries improve their industrial energy use. Okay. But somewhere, like me, it's my perspective. Somewhere I see there was not much what do you say, there were certain limitations is because there were some loose targets, there was a limited industry coverage as well, and that actually has been addressed in the carbon market. That is what they say. And this recent amendment in the Energy Conservation Act, so it somewhere helped the government in laying the groundwork for the voluntary carbon market by allowing the notification of the energy consumption, etc. So with respect to the role of each stakeholder, we will come to that point. I have a sort of uh, a diagram for you where where we'll be talking about that who will play what role. And for example, let's say B is the main administrator when it comes to your PAT scheme as well, and for the Indian carbon market as well. So what does draft include as of today? So draft, it talks about the legal framework which is established under the Energy Conservation Act 2001 and the Environment Protection Act 1986. It somewhere talks about the roles and responsibilities. It also talks about that this notification was out in the June 28, 2023, which talks about, and it defines the Indian carbon market, where this also aims at reducing, removal, and avoidance of the greenhouse gas emissions. Somewhere they have very precisely given that what will be the calculation aspect as well. It somewhere says that the when it comes to compliance mechanism, so under the CCTS scheme, there will be certain entities who will be called obligated entities. So these obligated entities they will be given a specified target, okay, for like annual period of 3 years. Now they have to work towards reduction of their emission intensity, and maintain that target. So if they are able to do that, they will be given some credits in their registry accounts, which can be tradable. If they are not able to do it, so they will have to buy the credits. So that is how it was. We'll look one example for it as well. So it also talks about setting the GHG emission intensity targets, as I told you. So here actually our Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they will specify the intensity targets that is measured in TCO2. So one carbon credit also when we talk about, so it is like avoidance or removal of 1 TCO2e, that is tons of carbon equivalent. And the targets will be defined for each cycle within that trajectory. It somewhere also speaks about the annual targets and the trajectory period. So basically, this obligated entities of some sectors, from some sectors, the obligated entities, they will receive the annual targets for 3 years trajectory period, and targets upon what do you say, once you achieve the targets, so these targets will keep revising with this 3 years. So the it is important when you talk about the compliance. So from the time to time, basically, there will be divisions or there will be revisions in your targets, and the obligated entities, they will be notified with respect to these targets within each annual year within the compliance cycle. There is also aspect of issuance of carbon credits, because as I told you, there will be somebody who will have to buy the credits, but somebody who will be selling the credits. So this buying and purchase of credits is also aspect which is very clearly discussed in the draft, where, let's say, obligated entities failing to achieve the targeted GHG emissions will have to purchase the carbon credits. But this purchased will be difference between the achieved and the targeted intensity for the relevant obligated entity or the production in the compliance cycle. It somewhere also talks about purchase of the carbon credits for meeting the target. So obligated entities can actually buy the carbon credits to fulfill their emission intensity targets in the each compliance cycle. So that is like 3 period is you have to maintain the target for the 3 years. You have to look into reduction of the emissions, etc. So on those aspects, obviously when it comes to giving a target, there will be aspects like what should be your target, whether what is the reduction that can happen with respect to that sector, that all things will be taken into consideration. They have spoken about a very small illustration in the draft in the starting itself. I'll just give a brief on it on a very high level. So let's say if in a compliance cycle, the obligated entity, let's say there is an obligated entity A. So they have been given the emission intensity target of 200 TCO2 per unit of the product. And they have achieved, let's say, 180. So they were given 200, 200 was their limitation, but they have actually they were actually successful in achieving till 180 only. Okay, so there they will be that like 200 minus 180 is like 20. So those 20 credits will be issued to them. Now let's say there is an obligated entity B. So they were given the targeted GHG intensity of 250, but 250 TCO2 of the product, but their achievement was 270. So that is like minus 20 ka difference. So they will have to buy the 20 credits to meet their target. So that is how is the aspect of when it comes to compliance or it comes to issuance. Obviously we'll discuss more in the upcoming slide. Any questions with respect to this? Like, I would like to
So,
start.
Samiksha, I think some people are saying ki PPT not changed, but I know ki you are just starting, you are not moved out your PPT. And actually, I seeing the draft, they had not mentioned the category of carbon credit. So mostly people have various confusion ki which type of carbon credit we can generate. So I think at the draft they are more focusing on the energy side and other aspect. They had not mentioned ki this type of category that we are covering in future for the like some water credit is also available. You can take some carbon credit from the tree plantation, gas cook stove. Lots of the category right now at India, they are generating the carbon credit. So the category, I think the categorization is not mentioned and approved list is not there at the
When
draft.
it comes to categorization, Nitin, actually, we are more focusing the two drafts which are out, basically three
Correct.
drafts, which is eco mark, second is
Hmm.
plantation and water harvesting. That is a completely different
But these are
aspect.
all part of this thing.
Yeah, so that is a completely different aspect. That is a green credit market is what they are talking about. Okay,
Correct.
so depending upon the renewable energy aspect or tree plantation aspect or the water harvesting aspect, so that is going to be a completely different aspect. We may have such sessions for those as well in the upcoming, but this is more from a carbon aspect only. That is TCO2e only. If you refer to those drafts, they are more from a perspective. Let's say there is a water harvesting draft. So that water harvesting draft is more like conservation in your cubic meters. How much do you conserve, and how much credits you will be getting. So that is a completely different aspect. When it comes to carbon credit aspect, they have not mentioned that how much will be the avoidance, what will be taken into consideration. Yes, when it comes to this draft, they have spoken about how will you do the calculations of your carbon emissions, actually your carbon accounting. So that is a completely different aspect. That is a
So,
green.
Samiksha, I am also a part of Green Credit Committee, and lastly, I also go with the stakeholder consultation, and I asking the same question with the official, ki like if we generated the carbon credit, can we capable to generate the green credit? So at the starting, they are more confusing. They are saying ki carbon credit is different and green credit is different. But at the last of the session, they had agree with our words and they are saying ki if you are taking the benefit of carbon credit you cannot take the green credit.
Yes.
So the confusion is clearly if you take the green credit then you cannot achieve the carbon credit because in a single project two type of interested party cannot be achieved because if beneficiary you are done the registry from the carbon market and again you are thinking you can get the green credit, so it's not possible. You only take the one benefit. And some question is also coming at group ki how we setting the baseline and targeted baseline for these and who is the like interested party and how the compliance will be implemented on the group wise.
So on that level, obviously BAE is BE and CERC plus your Ministry of Forestry and Climate Change. They will play a bigger role. But let's say when it comes to PAD, so the intensity target, the specific energy consumption targets were given with respect to the each sector, right? So that is how they will do it for the carbon credit market as well. So let's say I know that when it comes to cement industry, for example, so I know that reduction of emissions when it comes to cement industry, and basically if cement industry is one of the industry where when you do your GHG accounting calculations, let's say scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, right? So the emissions or the scope 1 emissions are much higher than the scope 3, right? And that is not the similar case for, let's say, chemical industry or the other industries. So they will have those things into consideration when it comes to reduction or giving the targets as well. They will also be looking into various aspects, like say how much is the possibility of reduction. We will have that, I do have that thing in slide also. They will also look at what is the possibility of reduction, what is the limitation to it, and then the targets will be given out, obviously. Nitin, you actually spoke about the right thing, that the double counting when it comes to the credit system is also a problem. This is what we have also seen when it comes to the carbon market as a whole. That is what I'm talking about, the global level carbon market. In fact, there were many steel industries when we did the GHG accounting, when we had the GHG accounting reports, or when we looked at the GHG accounting statements. So what happened is that usually, let's say they used to have this waste heat recovery based plants. Okay. Now, when they were asked to submit this reports to MOF so there somewhere when it came to the reduction strategy, so there is a GHG accounting that is done, and they used to say that because I am procuring or I am consuming this power from waste heat recovery base, my this many emissions are have to be subtracted from my total emissions, and this is the quantity or this is my actual emission. And the same project used to be registered in the carbon market, and they were actually selling that credit on the carbon market as well. So somewhere they were showing that credit minus in their GHG accounting as well, and selling those credits as well. So that is wrong, right? So we hope that that will be actually taken care when it comes to our ICM as well. Yeah. So I'm changing the slide now. It talks about the framework of ICM. Is that seen? Nitin, can you confirm?
Yes, it
Yeah,
changed. It
yeah,
changed.
yeah.
Yeah. So this is the framework for ICM. I was just giving on a very high level the introduction with respect to CCTS that they have spoken it when it comes to ICM market as a whole. So obviously, when you talk about the whole draft and the drafts which have been coming out since March 2023, so it gives a very clarifying role about what will be the roles, how will be the relationships, what will the various factors that will be taken into consideration. So for example, who will be the governing body, who will be the administrator, who will be the regulator. So obviously there has been a governing body when it comes to ICM. The whole aspect has been brought down from the Paris Climate Agreement. So we as country, we have nationally determined targets as well, right? So there was a governing body named ICM board. ICMGB is what they used to call it. So that was which was actually co-chaired by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which is your MOEFCC, and the Ministry of Power. So this included actually the various key members, which are linked to the greenhouse gas accounting mitigation, which is actually taken from our NDCs, what we talked about, and which were our NDCs very clearly talk about uh, what what are the mitigation factors, or what are the mitigations that we are aiming at, right? So this are the like Indian Carbon Market Governing Board, they will play a key role in ICM in framing and giving the norms as well. So BEE still will be the ICM administrator and will accredit the carbon verifiers. So when it comes to reporting as a aspect, obviously you can go to consultants who will help you with the reporting mechanism, and then after reporting your data will be verified, and this verification will be done by the accredited carbon verifiers who will be accredited by BE actually. So this ACVs, so they will be responsible for measuring, reporting and verification, and they were somewhere also induct the technical committees to provide the sectoral guidance on the abatement potentials and the cost, as in the reduction potential and the cost. So there will be a registry who will be performing. So let's say when you're given a target, so there will be some compliances, some documents with respect to compliance that you will have to keep uploading, right? So this registry function will be handled by the Green Controller of India, which will coordinate with the market players and the exchanges, okay, in receiving the like periodic guidance on when it comes to, because when it comes to carbon as a whole aspect, the technology is also moving fast. right? So this ICM administrator, they will keep coordinating with the market players and the exchanges, especially, just to understand that what should be, if there are certain revisions which have to be brought in, because here exchanges and the carbon market players will play a very, very, very important role when it comes to, because they will be somewhere also be looking into what are the rates of the carbon credits when it comes to the other carbon markets which are already implemented in the other countries. So the regulatory duties will be fulfilled by our CERC, which will be responsible for balancing the market power and protecting the market integrity as well. So it will select and govern the carbon trading exchanges. So when it comes to exchanges as a whole, we know that there are like two exchanges as of now, PXIL and IEX. Even though PXL is your Power Exchange India Limited and IEX your Indian exchange, Indian Energy Exchange. So we know that when it came to PAT, I think PXL still does not trade the energy saving certificates, but IEX has been what do you say, they have been in very much touch when it comes to the ICM framework as well. They are looking into various aspects, they are learning from the part scheme as well, that how the trading should be taking place and what will their role be as well. And project proponents, obviously somebody who is with the target, or let's say some members who will help the obligated entities in actually trade their carbon credits, or actually buy or sell the carbon credits. So that is the entire regulatory or the framework that they have defined for ICM when it comes to this draft. Okay, so there is a very important aspect on intensity, trajectory, and the target. So how this will be defined? So here the central government, they will designate certain users or classes based on the energy consumption, the investment capacity, and the technological availability under that sector. So as I told you, when it comes to cement sector, obviously they will be looking into various aspects. They cannot give the same targets to every sector and everybody from the same sector, right? So that targets will be defined on these aspects, that is energy consumption, investment capability, and also the technology availability for that sector. So it will determine which designated consumers have to actually keep reporting these emissions, and what these emissions. So they also talk about the methodology which will come to. So here, obviously, these greenhouse gas emissions, when you do the calculations, so they have given a very clear cut what should be the emission factors that you have to consider as well. And there it is, this emission factors they have specified in India's biennial report as well. And somewhere, why this emission factor, just to have a standardized measurement. So it should not happen that somebody from the X cement factory is using certain different emission factor, and from Y cement factory is using certain different emission factor for, let's say, a diesel consumption. So there has to be similarization, or there has to be a equivalent emission factor, right? So that is the reason they have actually limited the emission factor. Not limited, they have come out with a certain database when it comes to consideration of the emission factors as well. So again, all the emission factors, all the calculations when it comes to the global warming potentials as well, all this aspect have been very clearly aligned in the annexure 1 of the draft, if you want to ever go through. Very different aspect that I have seen is when it comes to GHG intensity and the targets. Okay, so here it it will be based on the NDCs from the, like, what will be the contribution from the each sector, that, and the potential for the fuel switch, non-fossil use, and also the sectoral decarbonization aspect. Okay, so the entire decarbonization. You must have seen that many organizations as of now, they already have a decarbonization roadmap. They are already working on decarbonization roadmap. So many of them, they have a science-based target initiative commitment as well. So when it comes to these aspects also, they are going to talk about technology. They are going to consider what is the implementation cost, etc. as well. It cannot happen that everybody will be looked upon that, yeah, the carbon capture technology is available, so why don't you go and just install it and your emissions will be reduced. No, there has to be a very clear understanding that this is a technology available and this is a cost to it. It cannot be spent, the spend cannot go haywire that, okay, this is possible, just do it. No, that will not be possible. So when it comes to let's say giving a target, so again I told you that target will be given for the 3-year period for the each obligated entity, and the compliance is expected during the defined cycle for each obligated entity. So this is about intensity and intensity trajectory and targets. Okay, so this is a very important aspect when it comes to GHG accounting as well, a normal GHG accounting that we usually do, and the way they have drafted the accounting methodology and the data and reporting methodology when it comes to the whole draft. So let us just quickly summarize. So obviously, when it comes to emissions data and reporting, so they have spoken about the direct emissions, which include from sources owned by the obligated entity. We call it as scope 1, right? And such as like combustion from your stationary equipment, combustion from your mobile equipment, which are owned by the organization. Let's say steel sector, it comprises the emissions from the um, both fossil fuels and the process emissions as well, right? So those have to be included. Okay. When it comes to direct emissions and indirect emissions, they are talking about emissions resulting from the industrial processes. This somewhere, let's say, arising from your chemical reactions as well. And indirect emissions is mostly like the emissions which occur from the entities outside their boundary, right? Which is your scope 2 and scope 3 emissions. So when it comes to reporting as an aspect, so it is important that all the emissions whichever are relevant, what are the emission sources, both covering your energy and the process related emissions, have to be taken into consideration. Inclusion of the GHG emissions from the various energy sources, be it process related sources as well. Let's say if you have any volatile emissions as well, when you, if you are from a manufacturing of the you're from the chemical sector, so all those have to be included, and all those have to be estimated in carbon dioxide equivalent using the specified units that they have talked about. So there is there is an exclusion of GHG emissions from the biomass and the renewable energy. Also, you cannot just subtract that you consume renewable energy, so I'm going to subtract it from here, or I'm generating the renewable energy, I'm going to subtract it. No, that is not considered as of now. They have specified certain exclusions as well. So this exclusion are the emissions from the biomass, emissions from the renewable energy source, emissions from the captured or utilized carbon capture technology, emissions from the certain activities such as transportation and like such as construction, transportation and refrigerant leakages. So they have very clearly specified this as well. So a very important aspect that they have spoken in the entire draft is about the product consideration. So when we come to a GHG emission intensity, so it should be based on the main product or the equivalent product determined by the industry standards. That is what they have specified. The draft somewhere also speaks about that what should be the emission factors that you should be using. So you should be using the verified data for baselining of your GHG calculations. There should be a clear-cut differentiation between default emission factors and the actual emission factors. That is, for example, default as in the emission factors from the database like IPCC or let's say DEFRA, etc. And type 2, which is for the fuels and materials. So if you are able to get the emissions factor directly from your the supplier specific emissions factor directly from your suppliers or vendors, or you are calculating it by, let's say, if you're procuring fuel, so you know what is the net calorific value of that fuel which you have got from your supplier, so you actually use that emission factors or that data to calculate your emissions. So here there will be a
So,
technical
Samisha, any reason for excluding the emission from the biomass and other thing? Matlab, some people asking the same question at group.
Yeah, so basically, why they have said that is because there was a very, if you talk about India as a whole today, so we still are more focused on scope 1 and scope 2, obviously, because scope 3 is not mandatory, right? And again, what used to happen is, let's say, if I am consuming, let's say, renewable energy, and I'm not even generating that, if it would have been generation plus the consumption, it would have been the different aspect. Same when it comes to biomass, what is the practice that is used as of today is people account for their GHG emission. Let's say there is emission from fuels, there is emissions from your electricity. So let's say in fuels you have diesel, petrol, and then you also have biomass. And let's say in scope 2 you have like electricity. Okay, from grid. We are not talking about renewable energy here. So what people used to do is there was certain avoidance of emissions because of consumption or combustion of biomass, right? So people were directly canceling that out or subtracting that out from scope 1 and scope 2. So that will not be out. That will not be allowed. That is why they have said that this emissions, when you talk about directly subtracting it, they will not be considered here. You actually have to look at your scope 1 when it comes to fuels, and scope 2 when it comes to electricity. uh, have that statement and get it verified, and you will be given an intensity target with respect to it. When it comes to exclusions as a whole, why the exclusions have not been considered? Because there has been a practice where the avoidance or let's say sequestration has happened. People literally minus it or subtract it from scope 1 and scope 2. That is the reason they have kept it excluded.
And Samicha, same at solar aspect, I see a lot of the company sustainability reporting. Mainly people are doing ki if they have the solar plant and the renewable plant, they are directly subtracting the same data. Like if I am generating 50% power from the solar, then mostly people are taking the zero emission from the solar side and they can directly, mostly people are doing the same, but it's not a right practice. So, they are giving some insight from the solar side, they are covering the biomass, but also they are asking the same for the solar because mostly people are adapting the same thing.
Solar is your avoidance, right? That is what I said. It's
But
renewable energy.
100% is not possible. Solar plant have also mostly people are taking the zero emission, but it's not true. Solar is also emitting some emission because lots of the material are using its whole activity. So zero emission is a true wording or not? I think, as per my understanding, it's not true. You need to be taken some accounting because global GHG protocol have the different aspect. Maybe the Indian draft have the different aspect. So we cannot compare them with the global and India. India have a separate vertical and the separate thinking. So I think one person is asking the same question at group. So I'm clearing the same. You cannot compare the Indian carbon traded scheme with the global scheme because their methodology is different. India is just starting at the starting of the age, so we are just preparing the same. So maybe in 1 and 2 year, the draft and other thing will be more implemented.
See, somewhere here, if you talk about the whole scheme or the whole draft, they have been very careful, okay? Because what happened is when we So there is one more market which we have, right? Indian renewable energy certificate, REC certificates. So everybody was given, so there were obligated entities, they were given RPO, renewable purchase obligations, etc., right? So I somewhere like I have worked in on that aspect. I've been trader for some time as well, where we have helped the obligated entities and the generators in buying, selling the credits, that whole trading aspect. Somewhere I feel that it has been failure. Okay, why? It is completely my view. Why? Because when it came to verification or when it came to scrutiny, okay, so
Correct.
I've seen organizations that there is a RPO target that is given to that XYZ organization, and some percentage of solar, non-solar, and so now non-solar, solar, it has all gone down because obviously the floor price is zero. But earlier times I'm talking about, so they were given certain percentage of solar credits to be certificates to be purchased, and certain percentage of non-solar to be purchased, right? Now what happened? Now, because the certificates of solar were sold on a very higher price, so slowly what people started doing is they started having this, whatever was the requirement of the RPO, they used to install that amount of capacity within their boundaries. Okay. And then they used to show that, okay, this was my RPO regulation with respect to solar, and I have this much installation capacity which has generated this much, so I am not going to buy solar certificates, I have bought non-solar certificates. And after few years, nobody knew whether it was working also or not. That small capacity, whether it was working also or not, nobody looked into it. Nobody came down and verified it. Okay. And also, when you talk about this scheme, they have very clearly looked into the aspect of net zero as well. Okay. Because carbon neutrality is what? Carbon neutrality is you do the emissions, you calculate the emissions, you buy the credits and offset. That's all. But here, the scheme, why they have considered as exclusions is that they want the organizations to work on reduction as well. Right? Otherwise, neutrality was very easy to do, right? You buy the credits and the emissions which have happened so many years before, and you just neutralize or you offset the emissions. But here they have very clearly said that, okay, just don't offset. Offset after reducing. After reducing as well, there will be some percentage that will be with you, but you will be on that roadmap to actually start reducing the emissions, right? So that is why somewhere these exclusions and inclusions have to be, they have very clearly mentioned about these aspects.
Correct.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Myself, Firoz, and I'm working in a construction industry. So I did this carbon emission inventory analysis and all. So as per my understanding, for scope two, only we are considering the purchase electricity from, and we subtract the part of renewable energy sources. Because in scope 2 only we are consider direct emission from the purchased electricity, but for the solar part we calculate into inventory of scope 3, because it is not direct, it is supply chain value or some other sources, the product wastage and regeneration and everything. So this is the reason I think, because my company is doing the same. So this is the only reason we are not considering in the scope 2 direct emission from renewable sources. Similarly for biofuel as well.
So even biofuels or be it any fuels, okay, I'm just talking about fuels, be it biofuels or non-biofuels, there is something which is like WTT, which is has to be considered from tank to like well to tank. So even when it comes to those calculations, people don't do it. Those calculations have to be considered when it comes to scope 3 emissions, when you talk about value chain emissions as a whole. So those calculations are not done, is what I've seen. And very rightly said, actually, Firoz sir, even though let's say when it comes to scope 2, you know that you're procuring renewable energy, but you need to understand, you need to scrutinize, or you need to verify whether that emissions which you are like clearly saying that there are no emissions and this is like completely my zero emission. Somewhere there will be certain transmission and distribution emissions which have to be considered in scope 3. So that is completely neglected by the organizations. And also you need to verify, because I have seen the sometimes what happens is there is a power plant, there is a solar power plant, some XYZ is, and that project is registered in the carbon market as well. Some XYZ is saying, the one who has registered the project says that I have registered this project in the carbon market, but because I have a renewable energy project, this is the emissions that I have avoided, I'm going to minus them. And let's say that this project has a PPA in place or power purchase agreement in place. So same power, same quantum of power, sometimes it's reported 3 times. First, under carbon market. Second, the developer or the generator himself is subtracting it. And third, somebody who is procuring that power shows that this is a renewable energy and my emissions are zero. So some same quantum, 3 times it is reported. And we do not have any, we do not have any verification process in same. That is the reason when it comes to greenwashing or some organization is put into that circle and then people start questioning, right? So it is very important. And I gave you this example of same quantum being considered 3 times. I have seen that example when a verification agency bought this up, that what is the proof that you have that somebody who is generating is not showing that this is my emissions avoided. So we have seen those struggles as well.
Yes, correct.
It is just
One more, Samiksha, I had a one doubt actually. Actually, since last 1 year, I am doing the GHG emission inventory, and I'm confused why we are not considering net calorific value while we are, converting. We are using emission factor, approach. So why we are not considering net calorific value instead of GCV? We are using GCV, gross calorific value, while converting the, carbon emission from fuel, whatever we are consuming. Is there any specific reason? Can you?
so what I have seen, because this was with respect to one of the steel sector client that we had. So basically, the NCV, usually when you go for the verification process, okay. Now let me tell you, let's say take an example where you're calculating the emission with respect to a fuel, where you're taking the emission factor directly from, let's say from DEFRA. Okay. So there what happens is you have your data with respect to fuel activity, the activity data, you have emission factor from DEFRA, and it becomes very easy for the verification and people just move on. The verifiers move on, the client also move on that, okay, I got my verification certificate. Actually, the calculation should be considered having NCV. But what happens is sometimes this is not the case always. When it comes to when you do the calculation with respect to NCV or be it your GCV, it should be done consideration with the net calorific value, because it will vary from location to location. So it has to be done with NCV, but sometimes when you do this calculation, the verifier will actually question you back saying that show me how have you come to this, or how have you calculated it, or whether do you have any reports, like when the coal it comes into the let's say any of the factories or any of the manufacturing units, so they have certain sample or analysis that is done, right? So there it is important that NCV is to be considered. And but if you are considering NCV, the verifier will ask you that show me from where have you bought this value. So people usually do it normally while doing DEFRA, but not via NCV. But the correct approach should be NCV, which is actually spoken in this as well.
Okay. So
Yes,
are
Samiksha,
the emission
I'm
factor
also
given by
agree with
DEFRA
the
or GHG protocol are same or different?
Sorry, I did not get you.
The emission factor given by the GHG protocol, by EPA 2018 are same with the DEFRA or it is different?
No, they are different. They will have sort of a few a few minuscule differences in each of them. Okay.
Okay.
That is there, but also it depends. uh, the whole aspect is now India has somewhere with the verification of GHG accounting or the verifications that we have also done, so we have seen that people are more referring to DEFRA as a whole. Okay, because the revision of the emission factors happens very this thing. But if there is somewhere a window to have calculations of the fuels with respect to NCV, please go for it. It's a very correct aspect, and you will anyways have to do it when it comes to reporting to if you become an obligated entity, you will have to report with respect to that, because they
NCV.
So, Samicha, I agree with Firoj, but actually, the real methodology to calculating the real emission is the NCV and GCB, because mostly we are taking the reference of GHG protocol, IPCC, and other emissions. So they are a particular emission factor. But why company are not taking the real emission factor? Because when you are doing for the assurance, the person is asking the document. Like if you have a certification for the calorific value and other things, so mostly time company don't have the backup data. Like if you are taking some coefficient, you have the supplier certificate who gives the real value and it's certified. Have you done any testing? So if you have the test report of all the calorific value and other thing, then you can take in. So it's depend on you. How can you verify and satisfy the verifier? So if you have the all the document, you not to take in, because if you see the framework, no framework is saying you are take the emission factor from the GHG, IPCC and DEPRA. So you are free to choose anyone, but it's depend, the source will be verified. You can take the emission fact from the verify source, and if someone is asking the same, you can give the answer and verify the same. So Firoj, it's depend on
Um,
you. You can take the anything, but you have the backup data and you can prove the same
yeah.
ki the you are
I
taking
would
the
like to
correct
highlight
one.
one thing here. What we did in our organization, because we are a French-based organization. So what we did here, we first, when we have created our methodological guide to reporting and all, then that time itself we have mentioned everything like emission factor and all regarding to particular subject. So the verifier Deloitte, they have approved the methodological note only. So actually the reporting system which has been generated, or digitalization system we are using right now, so it has been created in that way that whatever emission factor we have considered while we were preparing our methodological tool, so similar factors we have captured over there. So now it is very easy for us to get validated by Deloitte. Every year they are doing, even every quarter they are doing verification for our data.
See,
So I
Firoj,
think
in past
whatever
company, I
source
am
we are
following the
using, it
same
should be,
also.
yeah, the source,
But
whatever we are giving reference, they are not
hmm.
having any issue with that. But whatever we are giving, it should be, specified somewhere, and it will be like accepted by the global agencies. This is the only way we can do.
Correct.
Rest of the
You
things,
are
yeah.
correct. You are correct, Firoj. Because not from your company. Mostly company are using their own emission factor. Like at past, I working with our FMCG company, and we are using own emission factor. We had make the emission factor with the help of supply fuel, GCV, and other values. So we had taken the certificate from the supplier, and we had done the testing, and we make our own GHG inventory, and it's approved by auditor also. So it's all depend on documentation and control.
And
So Savicha,
one
actually
more thing,
time is
I
already
just
even. So if you
one
cover
more
the
one more doubt
PPT
I am
and we can.
having. Samiksha, will you please clarify one more doubt?
yeah.
Uh,
Firoj, ca-
is
Firoj,
That's only one
can
question,
we
sir.
cover the query at the end of the session, because we need to be also cover the PPT, then we can take
Actually,
in.
this is very difficult for us because we are doing this emission. The fugitive emission, we are not considering why it is, why we are not doing this thing. Is there any?
Firoj, I'm requesting to you. Once Savicha will complete the PPT, then we need
Sure,
cover
sure,
all the
sure, sir.
query,
Go ahead.
because the PPT need to be
Yeah, go
covered.
ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Savicha, if you
Okay,
have
fine.
slide, you can take in, because the time is already.
Yeah, so I like quickly finish. I actually wanted to cover the calculation on a very higher part, but I think Nitin, then for the calculation, we'll keep it because it's very detailed. We'll have it in the next session that we like. How do you want to do it? Because it's a very elaborative part. What is to be considered? How the calculations have to be done? Like, how do you want to do it then?
So, Samicha, we will plan some session on the GHG accounting, because it's we cannot cover the GHG accounting calculation through online and 1 hour session. We need maybe taken 2 hour and 3 hour session for the whole GHG accounting. So we will do one thing. We will discuss in group, and accordingly we will plan in some other weekends and other thing. We can plan some particular session for the GHG accounting and other things. So we not invite everyone. We only the interested people. We will. Play a
Okay.
different session for this person.
So let me just quickly finish this. Okay, and then we will go forward with if there is anything else that is required, we'll go, because I'm still on slide like 4 and I had like 11 slides. So that is what. Anyways, I'll finish with this. So when it comes to data and reporting, so obviously everything has to be reported in terms of CO2 equivalent, and your ACVs will actually help you in verification of the entire inventory before you submit it to the registry for plus and minus, whether you get the credits or you have to buy the credits, that aspect. There is a very important aspect when it comes to monitoring plants that has to be what do you say, that has to be corroborated when it comes to the responsibilities of the obligated entity. So here they have to very clearly establish that every year, even with the PAT as well. So every year they will have to talk about that what will be the emissions that they will be reducing, and what will be the plan with respect to that as well. So this will be somewhere this has to be verified, or this has to be bought like a plan in action, and your ACVs will play important role as well. So when it comes to monitoring plans as well, so there has to be clear indication that, let's say, if you are going to, how are you going to reduce your emissions? If you are going to do it via like switching to different fuels, or let's say if you're switching from diesel to CNG, and then from CNG to, for example, let's say for vehicles, if you're switching from diesel to CNG, then CNG to EVs. So that has to be very clearly mentioned. There will be a timely submission of data to the Bureau of Energy Efficiency in the compliance period, which will talk about your activity descriptions, your data flow procedures, your sampling techniques as in. So this, whatever net calorific value or gross calorific value that we are taking into considerations, so this will be actually for the fuels and the raw material samples, let's say. So this sampling, or the obligate entity, they will have to have a sampling plan, which will be more to from the point of view of fuel and material, and this will be taken from the auto samplers at the fuel feeding points, and this will be internally and externally tested at our NBL accredited labs, which will give you the analysis that these are the conversion factors that have to be considered, and this have to be these samplings have to be done on the quarterly basis. So again, when it comes to the treatment of the let's say renewable energy, or or the carbon capture, utilization and storage, it has been what do you say, treated differently in the entire draft. Okay, somewhere let's say the exported electricity, let's say if you're generating, you have a captive power plant, so whatever you have exported, let's say some quantum, some capacity is what you are using, but some capacity is what you are exporting. So that will be considered, that has to be considered, that will be adjusted in your overall emissions. And obviously, when it comes to renewable energy, as I told you, that emissions will be completely excluded. You cannot just subtract that. Also, the carbon capture, utilization, storage, when it comes to originating from the entity's operations, so this will be from the overall, let's say if you are building a certain CCUS operations. Okay, if you are going to bring in certain operations with respect to, you're building a plant with respect to it, the emissions associated with construction of that will have to be considered. But again, you cannot just subtract the emissions that have been captured because of this. So this, if you are saying that this is what I have avoided, or this is what I have sequestered, or this is what I have captured, a very clear demonstration and the monitoring of that will have to be incorporated in your monitoring plan as well. So when it comes to data reports and verification as a whole, So you have to have a yearly data for 3 years consecutively. You have to work on your reduction plan. You have to talk about the reduction plan. You also have to report the annual electricity, your energy consumption and your GHG emissions very clearly, which the format is what they have given in the draft, which is like Form A is what is given. So that is another aspect. So obviously, when it comes to estimation of the emissions, so as we spoke about direct and indirect emissions, so the emissions calculation, that is scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 is all the three, and within the operational boundaries is what they have very clearly specified what will be the boundary of the emissions calculation. So here, the standard emission calculation or the emission factors that you have used, that they are also specified so that they should not vary from one cement factor, one cement organization to another cement manufacturing organization. Here, there was one thing that I spoke about, that if you're generating electricity and some quantum is what you are consuming and some quantum is what you are exporting, so that has to be taken care. So wherever there is this aspect, as in the export and import, there has to be utilization of mass balanced methodology. That is while calculating from the fuel or the material as well. Let's say if you are bringing in the fuel, if you are using it to generate steam, okay, so let's say, and some percentage of the steam is like exported, so that has to be clearly mentioned and that has to be clearly calculated and specified in your emissions
Yes,
calculations
correct.
as
We are doing the same. Yeah. We calculate if we are using fossil fuel to generate electricity, we are not considering the purchase electricity. We kept it into the fossil fuel consumption. That's all.
So there is very important aspect, as I underlined as well, that mass balance methodology. So this is actually taken into consider when you do the life cycle analysis. Okay. So this method actually calculates the CO2 emissions by multiplying the activity data, that is fuel or the material, entering and leaving your boundaries. Okay, by the carbon content of the
Okay.
fuel or the material. So that is actually multiplied. They have given the number as well, which is 3.664 TCOT per TC. So this could be similar to the mass balance methodology is not something
Okay.
new.
Where is
This
it mentioned? I did not see ever this methodology,
Firoj,
mass balance.
Firoj, I'm again requesting you. I already told you two times. Please
Yeah,
ask
sorry,
your
sorry.
question at the end of the. So,
Okay, sure.
please, please,
Okay.
once we finish, we will cover you.
Nah,
Please
sure, sure. I
wait.
understand. Okay, okay, go ahead. Actually, this is the curiosity. I just want to know. I did not see ever
No,
the
no
mass
issue.
balance.
We will
Yeah, yeah.
complete your all query. Maybe we take
Yeah.
another.
Thank you.
No
Thank you, my
issue.
friend.
We will
Sorry,
cover
huh?
you.
Okay.
So this mass balance methodology is not something new. If you are from the steel sector or you have been associated with the steel sector, there is a world steel methodology which already has, when it comes to GHG accounting up to, with respect to world steel methodology, they already consider the mass balance methodology when it comes to calculation. Whatever is entering, whatever is leaving have to be considered, the emissions have to be considered from that perspective. So there is emissions from the biomass or your biogenic fuels, which are classified under biogenic, and they are not included in the overall emissions. These emissions will be reported separately. Why? Because somewhere when you burn a normal fuel, uh, you're making the emissions, but somewhere when you do the biomass or biogenic fuel combustion, you are somewhere avoiding the emissions. So they have to be very clearly separately reported. So that report, I think the report structure will also soon come out with respect to, let's say, because there are various stakeholders who are working on it. So maybe it will very clearly indicate where what is to be reported. Again, when it comes to important factor, which is oxidization factor, which they call about. So this is a factor for the fuel combustion, which is adjusted with the oxidization factor. So in, let's say, if you do not have this, so this actually has to be monitored and measured by the obligated entity, the one who is doing the calculation, who is liable to purchase or sell the credits. So let's say if you don't have the oxidization factor, you can apply 1 as a default factor and you can move on and you can do the calculations. So again, with respect to purchase electricity, so the emission factor has to be taken from the Indian power sector, the Central Electricity Authority, that is CEA emission factors. because those are more supplier specific emission factors. There are aspects like non-energy related process emissions, so which are yet to be like if they are like applicable. Okay, so that also have to be, if you have the formula, if you can use the formula which is provided by BE in the draft, you can do the calculation. Again, very important aspect. So all the emissions, after calculation, you have to come to a point where you will be calculating the specific GHG emissions. So these GHG emissions are calculated by dividing the total GHG emissions by the product output from the obligated entity. So that is how your intensity will be looked from the product point of view, or the product intensity point of view. So this methodology basically is, it aligns it, they have actually extracted the best practices from most of the markets which are already there, and most of the methodologies which are already there. Let us quickly move on. When it comes to trading, obviously the entities will be issued, the obligated entities, they will be issued the credits if they were successfully able to maintain the GHG intensity that they were that they were specified to, or that they were told to. So they will be issued certain credits, and they can actually register themselves on the ICM, or get registered with some other member who is there on the Indian carbon market or Indian carbon trading exchange, and sell their credits. The prices of the credits are not yet disclosed, or not yet, they have not come to that pricing, because they will look on the other markets as well which are already available, and they will come to that price. The trading obviously will the obligated entities, actually they have to register within the 4 weeks of receiving the carbon credits, and they need to provide the relevant details, whatever defined fee is provided for that issuance of those credits. And obviously the procedure is set by your CERC. So let's say the entities who are not the obligated entities, but they want to buy the carbon credits, they can also get registered and buy the credits. Okay, so everybody will get a certificates once you buy or trade the credits, not trade the credits but buy the credits, let's say. So you get a certificate from Indian Carbon Exchange or CERC, it is not specified. Mostly it will be the Indian Carbon Exchange, wherever the trading is happening. You will receive a certificate for compliance, which you can further attach for your compliance declaration as well. So again, the certificate of after you get the certificate, you know this tradings will happen on power exchange, that is IEX or PXL, which I have already mentioned. And there will be certain set of rules by IEX as well, ICX as well, or let's say Indian carbon trading platforms as well, or exchanges as well, that how the trade will take place, when the trade will take place, etc. Uh, so this is a very brief that what will be the process of verification, etc. So this has been followed right now when it comes to PAT scheme as well. You develop a document, you have the compliance cycle within 3 months after your, so within the 3 months, you need to submit your performance assessment document, which is like Form A after the compliance cycle. So there will be a certain unique registration number which will be given to you. You will have to keep detailing out your emission reduction. You have to keep reporting that emission reduction. If there are certain achievements that have to be highlighted as well. So there will be agencies which will help you, or who will be the ACVs, your accredited carbon verifiers, who will help you in the verification plan development, and they will conduct certain site visits if required, and they will come out with the verified report, which will in turn will be accepted by BE for the obligated entities what do you say, compliance. So this will go on for like every 3 years. The plan will be devised, the intensities will be devised, and let's say once you know that after a certain period, let's hope that this becomes very successful, because somewhere organizations or the obligated entities, they will be pushed to have the emission reduction targets as well. So that aspect is very much built into the whole this thing. And when it comes to the conclusion or the certification, which involves the Form C in the draft itself, so it very clearly shows that what is to be submitted to like PEE, and also what you will require when it comes to compliance as a whole. So that is all about CCTS. As Nitin mentioned, obviously when it comes to calculation as etc., because that is a very different aspect altogether that we will have to discuss. We will have some sessions with respect to scope 1, 2, and 3 as well. And let us say we will try and accommodate more from the methodology of CCTS and the draft that they have provided. Yeah.
So, Samisha, we will do one thing. Like, if a person have any particular query and other thing, they can message me directly. So, we can plan some session according to, because suddenly the session planning is very difficult. So, in a shorter way, like we cannot cover the whole 100 people and 150 people query in a 1 hour time. So, maybe like 50 and 60 people are interested for the carbon credit. We can plan some session from the carbon credit side. We can plan some from the GHG accounting side, and uh, we want a real practical session. Maybe due to 1 hour session, we won't cover more thing, but due to time availability and other thing, we maybe the session we will be cover at different angle point of view. So that's why we want some short session, and we want a shorter audience to give more insight, because um, I requesting all person ki kindly unmute and open your hand so we can cover the query. So Mr. Brahmeshwar Mr. Brahmeshwar, you can ask your query.
Thank you, madam, for giving very beautiful insight, and we salute your knowledge, deep knowledge on the subjects, although it is very new in the India. I have a quick query like that. You have covered in the CCTS like that non-obligated entities interested in purchasing, they should register. My question is that non-obligated entities interested in selling, they can also sell there?
Sir, that is not specified, to be very frank with you.
So far I understand that it is a compliance market.
Sir, yes, that is the reason I earlier, when the start of the session, I spoke about voluntary market and the compliance market. It is very much a compliance market, very much a compliance market. Yeah, for the non-obligated entities, it is more like a voluntary aspect. You can come, you can buy the credits, and you can show.
But we cannot sell. That is clear.
No, that is, sir, that is, I will not say it is not given or anything. That is still not specified.
But in draft, it is not mentioned. That's why actually you are dealing with the subjects. That's why I'm asking. I mean, Mishra ji, you can also please. Actually, as I told you, we have sold our credit in the international market, but I think this doesn't facilitate us to sell in the ICM.
So a lot of the things will not be mentioned at draft. But still, a lot of the things not clear. So we will try to get some more clarity on it. We will revert back to you after discussion with other person view also taken.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Venkatesha, you can ask your question.
Good evening, madam.
Yeah,
Madam,
hi.
this is Venkatesh, madam. Actually, how the transition will happen between PAT framework and CCTS? Because both cannot coexist actually.
Yes, I clearly understand that. That is a reason somewhere, maybe, I'm not sure, because I have seen the PAT market as well, and I know how it was not very successful as well when it comes to it. So they are still in that discussion. In fact, there are like three. You cannot just look at two. There are like three. There is your renewable energy certificates as well, that you cannot leave it out, because even that, when it comes, even though you're talking about renewable energy as an aspect, so let's say when you are considering scope 2 emissions, or if you are talking about consumption of the renewable energy, somewhere that market also gets affected. So there are like three aspects that they are still discussing, whether everything has to be clubbed into one, or obviously PAT it cannot run side by side. It is similar with REC as well. It cannot run side by side with respect to Indian carbon market. We do not have any clarification with respect to that. We will have soon, because let me tell you, even the exchanges have not started, like I keep talking to exchanges, so they have also not started a deep thought into it. So that is yet to be clarified, to be very frank with you, Venkatesha.
Yeah, thank you.
I think
Firoj, you have any question? Firoj, you can unmute and your
Firoz,
ask your
Yeah, I
question.
can ask. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, yes.
Actually, Samiksha, my question is related to emission. As we can see, still I'm confused why we are not considering the fugitive emissions while we are calculating in GHG. So I don't know what is the reason, but I never seen that in any calculation. So many industries reports I have seen, but they are not considering the fugitive emissions, direct emission from fugitive sources.
so this question I have received from others as well, when there was a small series that was run by me on LinkedIn as well. When it comes to CCTS, yes, fugitive emissions, they become very important aspect. Maybe I told you, right? It's more like a learning for everybody. So if you're doing a calculation, obviously go ahead and keep calculating fugitive emissions. Sometimes what happens is your emissions from the fuels are lesser, but the emissions from the fugitive emissions go much
We
higher.
are correct.
Yeah, in an upstream in upstream companies, it is very huge actually,
Yes.
the leakage and everything, and but because I tried actually, but I saw that the framework whatever designed by the company, they are not going to beyond it, so they are not considering in the framework itself. So it's very
Yes.
difficult to
I think
calculate
that
this
will
emission. So
slowly
it
come
will
with the
consider in a greenwashing or not? I just want to ask one question.
sorry.
If we are not considering this fugitive emission in our GSC inventory, so will it be considered in a greenwashing or not?
So that is not the aspect of greenwashing. Greenwashing का aspect बहुत different है फिरोज. So greenwashing is like, for example, मैं कुछ दिखा रहा हूँ और मैं वो कर भी नहीं रहा हूँ, या फिर मैं वो दिखा रहा हूँ and sometimes it is double, triple, 4 times counted. So that is obviously if you are not disclosing something, that is not greenwashing. वो तो somewhere your draft is telling you not to disclose it ना, आप तो anyways उसको कर रहे हो. I am sure because you have been doing GHG accounting and 1, 2, 3 as well. Somewhere you may be having that commitment aspect as well when it comes to accounting. जैसे CDP हो गया. अभी CDP, when it comes to disclosing to CDP, they actually want you to have the emissions and calculate each of the emissions, and they talk about fugitive emissions on a very different level, right? So obviously this draft does not specify it, but it's a learning for them as well. And this is a draft. Let's say next draft that we get, we may have fugitive emissions
But we are
incorporated.
we are disclosing to CDP as well. We are listed in CDP disclosure.
Oh, that
So
is
That
okay.
Firoj, if you are doing the CDP have asking
but
all
we
the
are not
question in all
considering this
category.
fugitive. Still, we are not doing the fugitive emission calculation.
So it's actually depend on you. Like in scope 1 category, some company are not taking the CO2 cylinder emission and the refrigerant emission. So it's like in sustainability, lots of the freedom are there. It's depend on you
Yeah.
ki what you want to present.
Okay.
So and the data will be verified. Matlab, like if you are saying ki our scope my GHG emission is 100 metric ton and really it's 1000 metric ton. This is the greenwashing. But you are saying ki my emission is 50 metric ton coming from the fuel and you are not covering the fugitive emission, it's okay, it's not greenwashing.
This much flexibility we are having.
So at
Firoz,
sustainability, lots of the flexibility is available.
Firoz,
Like
I've
you,
been
scope 3
part
is not mandatory.
Firoz, I've been part of the verification process where you know what happened. They have done the GHG accounting, and then what happened is when it came to verification, they did not have proofs. Okay, they had some proofs, they did not have other proofs. So what happened? What 20,000, it went to 14,000. That is greenwashing because you did not have proof. Okay, so that was your problem. So you should have actually got all the proofs when you went for the verification. So that is
Yeah.
actually greenwashing, right?
Yeah,
But like,
same. We are getting the query like that only.
So Samicha, actually,
If
our
you
other
are
team
increased
member
in
have
reduction and
also
decrement more than 20%, then they will ask why it is happened since last year. So this kind of question only they are asking while validating. Correct. Thank you.
We'll quickly take,
So,
Nitin will quickly take
correct. So,
Suresh,
Samicha, I do one thing. I asked with Amin. So, actually, Amin have already some engagement at 12:30. So, Amin, can we continue 5 minutes and we can close the session because I know you have another meeting at 12:30.
Yes, sir, I am there.
Okay. So, we can continue for 5.6 minutes. That's
Yeah,
fine.
sure,
Okay.
sir. I will be there.
Okay. So, Mr. Suresh, you can unmute and ask your question. So, Samicha, we can take in one and two question and we will close because
Yeah,
12:30
yes,
is
sir.
already.
Very only one question, sir. Good afternoon, sir and madam. Very well interested subject you have taken, and it is well useful for our industry also. Sir, as you told, for CCTS, you are telling that RE power and biomass is also exempted. But in PAT cycle, whether RE power is exempted or only biomass?
in RE power is, so if you are already so again, PAT is with respect to the specific energy consumption. Okay. So there, if you are consuming renewable energy as well, so there that focus is more on reducing your energy consumption. So be that energy consumption, be it from your renewable or not renewable. Okay. Your carbon is more from a emission perspective. So here, if you are consuming renewable energy, obviously your emissions, the scope 2 emissions, somewhere they are zero. Okay. So that is completely different from, not completely related with the PAT. There the calculations are very much different. Here the calculations are very much different. The aspects and considered are very different.
Okay, understood.
Correct.
Understood.
Samicha,
One,
any person have
only one more.
any?
Sir, another
Yes.
only one small question. As you told, we need to follow the WSA for steel industry, but WSA steel mentioning CO2 only. But for our CCTS, we need to calculate CO2 E. No?
Sir,
Whether can we
did
consider?
say that we have to follow World Steel methodology. I said the mass balance methodology, whatever is entering your system and whatever is leaving your system, has to be considered. The methodology, mass balance methodology, has to be considered. Let's say if you are generating electricity and if you are exporting the electricity, so that has to be considered. That subtraction has to be considered. Those emissions cannot be on your head. That is what I said. Mass balance methodology has been it is not a new aspect. It has been introduced by it is very much there in the World Steel methodology. That is what I said. You don't have to use World Steel methodology. Completely different aspect.
Right, man. Thank you.
Okay. So Samicha, thank you. I think today's session is very interesting session, and when the participant will interact one by one, then the enjoyment is very good, and it's also gives some power to provide much more courses and much more session on the interesting topic. So I requesting all the participants feel free to interact with us. You can text me your particular query, what you want to be burnt in upcoming session. Like if you want some session on a particular topic, then we can design and make some insight because we can discuss with the other subject matter expert who are doing the same from the last so many years. So we can plan the session accordingly to your requirement. As you know, CAT market, lots of the person are available. So our main intent to provide the right information in a sustainable manner. So you can feel free to interact with me. You can text me your query, what you want in training point of view, in other point of view. How can we will provide our best solution for that. So you can text me your query. So accordingly, we plan the other session. And thank you all. And surely we will. Meet in other session in interesting session on the particular topic, maybe in JJ accounting and LCA. So we will plan the session accordingly. And I'm thankful to Samisha for a wonderful session today. And really, it's a lot of learning for all of us. So I'm thank you for all of you.
Thank you, Nitin.
Thank you. Thank you,
Guys,
Samiksha. Thank you, Nitin.
thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for the nice session.
Thank you all.